What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content you watch on the WWE Network and on Peacock. And today we're talking the Sami Zayn episode of Broken Skull Sessions back from July 22nd, 2022. I am bummed that I did not get to this sooner because this was a great episode. About 2 months old now, and we're slowly catching up on the Broken Skull Sessions. There was not a new one for September, which surprised me, but it also gave me a bit of a breather, I guess, so to speak, because there wasn't another one to catch up on, but I hope we get another one in October. But yeah, this one was great. Sami Zayn has been white hot lately, back then when this dropped 2 months ago, and especially now on SmackDown in the midst of the whole Bloodline storyline. He is awesome. He opens up the episode asking Steve, wondering when he was going to be able to be on the show. He's been, they've had a lot of guests on the show in the last 3 years, and he has not been among them until now, so he was waiting for his opportunity. I'm actually kind of surprised watching this that he hasn't had Kevin Owens on yet. Now, I know they just had a WrestleMania match earlier this year. I do suspect at some point he will be on the show talking about that match and the angle out of character, whatever. But even before that, though, Owens has been linked to Steve for a very long time. Like, well, even before he started using the stunner. Steve, most notably, helped Owens kind of get in the door of WWE, and he was a big proponent of his even well before he arrived in the company. So, I think he's been on Steve Austin's other podcast before, but never Broken Skull Session. So hopefully at some point we get to see that, because I think that'd be a great conversation too. But Steve says that Sami's taken off in recent years, and he was blown away by the Jackass feud, as all of us were back in WrestleMania season earlier this year. Sami Zayn mentions that he likes to drive Mustangs and just go on drives. When he goes, when he's on the road and stuff like that. Otherwise, at home, he drives a 2004 Nissan Altima, he says. He likes to sightsee because it might be his last time in that city. And he also kind of feels like it's his duty. Growing up a poor kid, and people kind of save up to go on vacation to certain cities, and he's there for work. He's getting paid to be there. So he feels like he's obligated to take advantage of that and go see these cities while he's there. He said they go into great depth about the Knoxville match, the Johnny Knoxville match from WrestleMania 38 earlier this year, as they mentioned. He's really proud of that match, and he feels like you would be stupid to the business if you did not like it. And it's hard to do a match like that, even at this point in his career where he's really done it all. It's hard to do a match like that and execute it as perfectly as they did. He said it checks every box, and they rewatched the match here on the show, and he mentioned the mousetrap finish, where Zayn got trapped by the mousetrap, got saved by Knoxville. It was a spot went wrong because the wire broke or whatever. The wire or the rope broke. So he had to improvise, Knoxville did, and he kind of made up for it. And honestly, you don't even really notice. I was trying to watch for it myself, and I couldn't really notice what exactly went wrong. But the finish went as well as they could have given the circumstances, and he praises Knoxville for that, even as someone who was new to the business. And he's been involved with WWE before, obviously, but there's veterans that could have been in that spot that wouldn't have known what to do, which is pretty cool. He does wonder what Bret Hart thought of it, though. He mentions, if you didn't like it, you're stupid. But I kind of wonder what Bret Hart liked, if he liked it or not, which is really funny. Vince, I guess, said that it was a work of art when he went back to the gorilla position after Mania this year. And he mentioned that he doesn't really know how it gets better after that. If he never does anything else, whether it be win another title or headline WrestleMania or whatever, if he can say that he did that match, then he's content. He is fine with that being like the peak of his career right there. He mentions going back a bit that he grew up on the Hulk Hogans and the Ultimate Warriors. Growing up, he had a friend through school that moved away that called him after he moved away, saying that, they were both interested in wrestling. The friend said, hey, I'm working for this guy now. He's a wrestling trainer, promoter, whatever. He said he's willing to train us for $25 a week. Sami could afford it, so he ended up doing it. They bumped on the grass. I guess he was saying, if you could bump on the grass, little room for error, then you could bump on a mat. That was their logic. Sami ended up being the last one left. The friend dropped out. All the other people in the training class dropped out, and Sami was the only one. And when it came down to just Sami, the trainer told him he was ready. So he started wrestling as Stevie McFly across the Canadian wrestling scene in Montreal, Quebec, whatever. And Stevie McFly, they make a joke about how it's a reference to Back to the Future, or at least Steve does. But Sami doesn't outright confirm, he just said that he thought it was a cool name. He didn't say, it was inspired by Marty McFly from Back to the Future, although I would have to guess that was the case. At that point, he wasn't really thinking about the future. He just wanted to really focus on the present, as far as, as his mom would say, he's going to become a WWE wrestler. And he was like, I don't know. I'm kind of focusing on just right now and making a name for myself. So he talks becoming El Generico in Ring of Honor and across the independent wrestling scene in the early 2000s. He compares the WWE schedule to an indie schedule that he had back then. He and Kevin Owens, at that point Kevin Steen, shared a very similar mindset. They bonded over wrestling, but they had the same mindset in that they would start here, conquer this, then conquer that, go to the States, and then maybe get to WWE. And he specifically says that WWE for them was more of a goal than a dream. Probably because they never thought it would actually happen. But they talk shaping that next generation through the likes of himself, Kevin Owens, Rollins, Claudio, Bryan Danielson, and everyone else that came out of Ring of Honor in the mid-2000s. Jamie Noble, I think, was of all people, was the one who reached out to Sami when he was in Ring of Honor and told him to put a DVD together, telling him, hey, we're putting together a Cruiserweight show. We would love to have you be a part of it. I think it'd be great. My kids love the whole El Generico thing, blah, blah, blah. So he started hearing rumors of a Cruiserweight show in WWE, and I specifically remember these rumors in like 2010, 2011. It was literally years before they obviously actually did anything about it. Wouldn't be until around 2016. But, there were rumors of a Cruiserweight show back in 2012, I remember, because they wanted people like Evan Bourne on it and people like that, and probably bringing people from the outside, like a lot like they did in 2016, which they brought a lot of people in from the outside and ended up signing a whole bunch of them. But so Sami wanted to keep his options open. So he wanted to keep working in Ring of Honor. So he told Delirious at that point, and Delirious approved this idea. Sami was like, I want to still work here, but just without a contract in case anything really comes up. And Delirious said that was fine. So he actually became Canyon Ceman's first wrestling hire in WWE. And I think it was a show that he had in 2012. Canyon was at that Ring of Honor show, probably a match he had with Steen. And he ended up getting signed out of that. So he actually did extra work once in 2010, and heading to his tryout, he was really inside of his own head thinking, oh, you don't belong here, blah, blah, blah. And then he had to stop on the way there and really psych himself up and say, listen, you're going to crush it, you're going to kill it, you belong here, you've wrestled Paul London before, he wants you there, blah, 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 all this other sort of stuff. And he ended up crushing the tryout. He thought he crushed the tryout. And he was really surprised that Triple H liked him. He didn't know what Triple H's view on wrestling was back then. Knowing now, he's not really surprised. But back then he was surprised that Triple H took a liking to him early on. He went by his real name briefly in NXT, which is Ramy. His wrestling name is Sami, but his real name is Ramy, and they went by. And he just thought it was weird to have the crowd chanting his name in matches and stuff because he wasn't used to it. He mentioned that NXT was very stifling at first, a very stifling environment, and he butted heads early on with Terry Taylor. That was back when Bill DeMott was there. And what they saw NXT being was not what it ended up becoming in the years that followed. It was a very WWE regimented product at that point, or just system, really. It wasn't even a show at that point. And he credits Cesaro for really breaking that barrier through specifically their 2 out of 3 falls match, and how that was a turning point. And Steven, first of all, that match was amazing. Incredible match. And I guess he just wasn't really feeling the whole WWE NXT thing until that match. That was really the turning point for him. And I'm glad that he said that because that match was amazing. And one of the unsung gems of NXT, in my opinion, even all these years later. Steve Austin says that NXT was the better show back then. And they're kind of reluctant to say that on air here, but it's fucking true. I mean, it wasn't even just the better show. It was the best show in the entire company, if not in all of wrestling, for several years there across all the companies. And especially over Raw and SmackDown. I mean, Raw and SmackDown were struggling for a very long time and still do today to a certain extent. But NXT was just the superior show in many ways. And he mentions how creating that NXT and, what they have now in that NXT and even a couple of years ago with the Garganos and Ciampas, all great. But he mentions that creating it was even more special because you'll never have that chance to create it again. They rewatch an old PC promo that he cut. Actually pretty good. And he mentions that he didn't really start to get comfortable on the mic and really start to find his footing in that respect until the Neville feud in late 2014, heading into their match at Our Evolution, which they watch. But they had a match, I guess, on that same show, either at the tapings or a dark match or whatever. Undertaker just so happened to be there, and he put him over, and he mentioned that was really like a box that was checked that night, with Taker really praising Sami and Neville for what they did in that great promo exchange in their match. He thought they fucking killed it. He said, that's how you sell fucking tickets. And yeah, so he mentioned how it really started to click for him as far as the promos go when he came back in 2020. And he mentioned how, he was always wondering, why is this person, getting pushed, and why is that person getting pushed? And he'll mention this later on as well. But he's always wanted to kill it in his own role. He'll really put the best of his ability into everything he's handed. And wanting to steal the show has gotten him to where he is today. And it's made him a lot happier as well, knowing that his role will never be a main event star a la Roman Reigns. That's just not who he is. But he can make the best of what he's doing right now in whatever role he's in and make people want to tune into the show for that as well. And I think the Knoxville match, like, oh, Roman and Brock is headlining WrestleMania, cool. But I'm also very interested in the Knoxville Sami Zayn match on the undercard. And they go back to watch the R-Evolution match, and Steve Austin says, oh, what a handsome kid. And then they laugh, and he goes, no, shoot, really. And Sami goes, listen, I try to be ugly on purpose. And he kind of doubles down on that and says, listen, I try to do this whole look on purpose because of my current character, which gives me hope if and when he goes back to being a babyface, hopefully soon when the Bloodline stuff wraps up, he will go back to that look from NXT. I don't know how similar he'll look to that NXT Sami Zayn, but the shorter hair and a trim beard, I feel like is the best look for Sami Zayn in my opinion. The current look, I mean, it worked for the character, but I miss that short-haired, short-bearded Sami Zayn from NXT, and hopefully we get that back soon with the old music to boot. That would be awesome. But anyway, like I said, they rewatched the R-Evolution match against Neville, and the significance of that feud, and also the feud with Owens and Zayn that stemmed from that in NXT and on the main roster, was not lost on either of them as far as, like, we're able to do that here in WWE. Like, it's crazy. They rewatch his 2015 Raw debut. Sami mentions he's had a lot of Raw debuts. He mentioned he had several appearances on WWE TV before he finally became a full-fledged member of the roster in 2016. I think he's referring to 3 different matches and moments. One, this match against John Cena for the United States Championship in Montreal on Raw in 2015. He also, his first ever appearance on Raw as Sami Zayn was in September of 2014 in a tag team match. It was right before TakeOver Fatal 4-Way. Sami and Neville had a tag match against Tyson Kidd and Tyler Breeze, which was really, really good. That was technically his first match on the show. And then he was also in the 2016 Royal Rumble. So he had a couple of appearances on the main roster before he finally arrived in March of 2016. So anyway, he mentioned they rewatched that Cena match, and he said that match also meant a lot to Cena because I guess Cena wanted it, and he really wanted to work with Sami, so he liked it. And he also mentions, had he not gotten hurt in that, he didn't get hurt in the match, he got hurt right beforehand, throwing his arms excitedly up in the air, and he dislocated the shoulder and put it back, which kept him out of action for quite a while, actually, in 2015. He mentions that had he stayed and had he not gotten hurt, he doesn't know if he would have stuck around. I think the only person that can answer that is Vince or someone on the creative team at that point. He doesn't know if he would have been kept around or if it was just a one-off. He probably would have. I mean, a couple of weeks later, he and Owens had that takeover match where Owens beat him again to retain the NXT championship, or it was a no contest or whatever. So he probably would have been called up soon after that, but we'll never know. Anyway, so he mentions how in that same building, he attended Survivor Series 97, the Montreal Screwjob in Montreal, back in 97. So Bret Hart introducing him that night was really like a full circle moment for him. While he was out injured, he said he gained a new perspective for the business as far as like, why do I do certain things? What can I do when I get back? He had a lot of conversations with Bayley, he said, about that, recently, because Bayley was out hurt recently before she just came back at the Performance Center. Steve, they rewatched the Sami Zayn Shinsuke Nakamura match, and Steve mentions that match is one of the best matches he's ever seen. He was in the building for that match, he said, and he watched it, and it's still one of his favorite matches he's ever seen live. They rewatched the match as well as the Battleground 2016 match with Kevin Owens. I'm glad they rewatched both of those because they're both fucking classics. And Sami can say with confidence it's probably their best match, and I would agree. I haven't seen the Ring of Honor matches, but just the story behind the Battleground one specifically, after all the history they had in NXT and WWE, made that one really special in my opinion. Anyway, so they talk about, or Sami himself doesn't really have one specific favorite match. He has like a top 10, top 5, whatever. Then he talks about turning heel. He felt like he was spinning his wheels in the summer of 2017, not really doing anything, and he's right. They did nothing with Sami on SmackDown in 2017, really. He feuded with Baron Corbin, like, briefly, and then I honestly don't even know if he was on the show for like a good chunk of that summer, fall, before he finally turned heel. And he was wondering, why am I not at a top level? Why am I not where Rollins is, and Ambrose, and Owens, and Roman? All these guys have been championed, and I haven't. What's it going to take for me to get to that next level? And Vince said, well, it's because you haven't been a heel yet. And he thought that was weird, but he gave it a shot. And I guess he had a match on Raw shortly before that where he was a special guest ref that really Vince started to look at him in a new light, saying, oh, you're really entertaining. Like, we need to see more of that from you and whatever. So he turns heel, became a mouthpiece for Shinsuke Nakamura like years later, like in 2019. And he was really hesitant about it because he's like, I like Shinsuke and all, and I can be a great manager, but I also kind of want to wrestle, which was the same, hesitations and reservations we all had about him in that role. They talk about the documentary that he made during that whole conspiracy theorist thing, that whole storyline in 2020 and 2021, and how the doc was never made. He said, we were planning on getting it made into a legitimate documentary and airing it on Peacock or whatever, but internal shakeups happened, and then it was never released. And hopefully at some point we still get to see that documentary. I feel like that'd be great. Maybe we see that documentary and the Bloodline are shitting on Sami even back then. And that's what leads to them beating the fuck out of him on Raw one of these days. That would be great full circle storytelling. That would be awesome. It's among his favorite stuff he's ever done. He also talks working with Logan Paul and how it just made sense in early 2021 going into WrestleMania 37, and how, social media is such a big part of who Logan Paul is, and Sami was kind of using him in the storyline to spread his gospel and spread his message of the doc through social media, so it was a pairing that made sense for as long as it lasted. He also likes when storylines bleed together as opposed to like one ending and then someone immediately jumping to something else completely random. They rewatched the interaction that he had with Heyman from June on SmackDown earlier this year and just praises Heyman for being a genius and enjoys working with him and enjoys his conversations that are not wrestling related specifically. As they wind down, Sami mentions that he feels like he could work in the main event at a main event level. He would like to win the WWE title at least once. He mentioned how, titles don't really mean a lot to him. They're not the be-all, end-all for him in wrestling. But it is cool to win a championship every now and again. He actually really enjoyed working with the Intercontinental Championship for as many times as he held that. But he would like to say he was WWE champion at least once. And you never know. It might happen someday. Who knows? He mentions that he could be a manager after he retires, a lot like Bobby Heenan and Paul Heyman and people like that. Would love for his legacy, he says, to be included among the greats who could do it all. People like Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle and, Shawn Michaels and people like that who could work as a babyface and can work as a heel as well. As far as people he wants to work with, he mentions only big names. He mentions Randy Orton, and they've had a couple run-ins, and they've probably had at least one singles match, but, maybe. I don't even know if they've had one singles match. They probably did 5 years ago, but the time period I'm thinking of as far as when they worked together was in late 2017. It was Owens and Sami having matches on TV with Shinsuke and Randy, because that was back when Owens and Sami were feuding with the authority figures on SmackDown, that being Shane and Bryan. So they were doing that whole thing, and they had interactions at that point, but Sami and Orton have never had a singles rivalry in WWE, and he thinks that'd be a lot of fun because people care about Randy so much. He even mentions, I'm not really sure what Randy's status is right now, and that was back in July. And I just read today there was more concern over Orton's injury than what was initially to be believed. So hopefully he's okay and he'll be back at some point. But he mentions he also wanted to work with John Cena, a program with Cena. I feel like that would be cool given their history on Raw. He mentions Roman Reigns, which has to fucking happen. I know they had a quick match on Raw or SmackDown late last year that was like 15 seconds, but going off of the whole bloodline thing now, I don't want to see him beat Roman Reigns for the championship. I don't think that's going to happen, but having him be the one to unseat the Usos as the tag team champions with Owens, to me, with Kevin Owens makes a whole lot of sense. They also rewatch and kind of recall the Brock Lesnar promo from late last year, which was just tremendous. And he talks about taking each match in context and how one opponent might be different from another. And he works very differently depending on his role, whether he's a face or a heel. If he's a baby face, he works very small. As a heel, he works very differently. And he's still learning even after over 20 years in the business. And that was about it. Steve just said that he's a big fan of Sami's work, and he's been killing it right now. He's really enjoying what he's doing, and just to keep it up going forward. And then they wrapped it up from there. But I thoroughly enjoyed this episode of Broken Skull Sessions. I thought even after 2 months, this aired back in July, it's still very much relevant. Sami is the best part of WWE programming right now alongside the Bloodline as part of that whole storyline. And he shared a lot of cool stories here and tidbits, and they rewatch a lot of great matches from his WWE run and talk about everything from Ring of Honor and before that and recent years and whatever. He's awesome. Sami is great. So it clocks in at around 90 minutes, an hour and 36 minutes, or probably more than that if you watch on Peacock with commercials, unfortunately. Without commercials, it's an hour 36. But, very entertaining conversation. I thought this was awesome stuff. and I can't recommend it enough. I thought it was great. So thank you guys for checking out my review. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Be sure to hit the bell button as well to be notified every time a new video goes up. We have one more Broken Skull Session show to review, that being the Charlotte Flair episode, which should be fine. I kind of wish in retrospect I had watched the Charlotte one Flair first and ended with this one, but I like to go in chronological order and watch them in the order they were released, so I kind of had to watch and review this one first and then the Charlotte one. But this was still good stuff, and I enjoyed it very much. So check it out right now on the WWE Network. The Charlotte one should be up soon here in my list of reviews here on Network and Chill, so keep an eye out for that in the next couple days. Have an awesome one, guys. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.